Coffee stains spread across the Italian marble like blood on white skin. Clara stood motionless, the cloth still in her hand, as Victor Morales erupted in a rage that seemed disproportionate for a simple accident. But it wasn't about the coffee. It never was. Incompetent! The words spewed from his mouth like spit. Do you have any idea how much this floor costs? Do you? Clara pressed her fingers against the damp fabric of the cloth. 52 years of life had taught her that silence was the only safe answer, that lowering her head hurt less than raising her eyes. That being invisible was, sometimes, the only way to survive. I'm talking to you. Victor moved closer, his face red, veins bulging in his neck. Or are you deaf as well as stupid? 3 employees walked past in the corridor. They slowed their pace, looked. Nobody stepped in. The new secretary, the one with blonde hair and expensive earrings, averted her gaze with an embarrassment that didn't make her move her feet. The sales manager pressed his lips into a thin line and kept walking. Witnessing was tolerable. Intervening was not. Clara knelt and began to clean the coffee, each movement slow and deliberate, as if the act of scrubbing the floor could also scrub away the humiliation. But Victor wasn't finished. He never finished until he had extracted every ounce of available dignity, until he saw the other person completely broken. Look at me when I speak to you. She raised her eyes, and in that moment, something changed. Not in the room, not in Victor, but inside her. A tiny crack in a dam that held back decades of pent-up waters. Do you know what this is? He picked up a folder from the table and shook it in the air. It's a strategic report. It has data, analyses, projections. But you wouldn't know the difference between this and a restaurant menu, would you? Because people like you, he paused, savoring the words to come. People like you don't need to know how to read. You just need to know how to clean. The silence that followed had texture, heavy as lead. The employees in the corridor finally moved away, unable to sustain even the position of spectators. Clara felt something rise in her throat, not tears, but an ancient, sedimented rage that she had kept buried for so long that she had forgotten its taste. By the way, Victor took 2 steps towards the bookshelf, picked up a document in English and threw it at her feet. Read this for me. Go on, read it. Or don't you know how? The pages fell open onto the coffee-soaked floor, the ink beginning to smudge. Clara looked at them, then at Victor, then back at the pages. Each second stretched like an elastic band about to snap. You can't read! He screamed now, the words ricocheting off the glass walls. Just admit it. You can't read! A functional illiterate who barely finished elementary school and thinks she can work here. Clara stood up slowly. She collected the pages from the floor, one by one, with a calm that seemed strange even to herself. She smoothed them against her thigh, placed them back on the table, perfectly aligned. Then she picked up her cleaning cart and left the room without saying a single word. But as she walked down the corridor, as she entered the changing room and locked herself in the bathroom stall, as she finally let the tears fall, hot and angry and laden with years of swallowed silence, a single phrase echoed in her mind. He doesn't know. None of them know. And in that solitary cry, amidst the smell of disinfectant and the muffled sound of distant voices, Clara made a decision that would change everything. She just didn't quite know how yet. And in that solitary cry, amidst the scent of disinfectant and the muffled sound of distant voices, Clara made a decision that would change everything. She just didn't know exactly how yet. Clara's apartment was on an unpaved street where dogs barked at every shadow and children played barefoot even in winter. It was a small house, 2.5 rooms, with damp walls and a window that wouldn't close properly. But it was hers. Every brick had been paid for with blood. Not literal blood, but the invisible kind that drains when you sell every hour of your day, every drop of strength, every piece of dignity. When she arrived that night, it was past 10. Sophia was hunched over anatomy books, her glasses slipping down her nose, a mug of cold coffee beside her elbow. She looked up when her mother entered. "Are you okay?" Clara forced a smile. That smile that mothers master like no one else. The smile that hides hunger, pain, fear, exhaustion. The smile that says, "I'm fine," when every cell in your body screams the opposite. "Just tired, my daughter. Long day." Sophia studied her for a moment longer than usual, but then returned to her books. She had a test on Friday. She needed to study, and Clara didn't want to be another burden on her daughter's shoulders. Sophia already carried enough. The guilt of being expensive, the pressure to justify every sacrifice, the invisible burden of being someone else's fulfilled dream. Clara went to her room, closed the door, and did something she hadn't done in months. She knelt beside the bed and pulled out the dusty shoebox she kept underneath. Her hands trembled as she opened the lid. 23 notebooks, some with faded floral covers, others just simple booklets. The pages yellowed by time, covered in small, neat handwriting. Each line written by candlelight or under the dim glow of 20-watt bulbs. Years, decades, an entire life distilled into words no one had ever read. Clara picked up the first notebook and opened it to the first page. The date, March 15th, 1989, 36 years ago. She was 16, 3 months pregnant, kicked out of her home, sleeping in a shelter that smelled of mold and despair. And yet, she wrote, "Today, I woke up hungry. Not the hunger that aches in the stomach, that one I know well, but the hunger to tell, to put on paper what it's like to be no one, what it's like to walk the streets and see people's eyes pass right through you as if you were transparent. Maybe I am. Maybe I am a ghost, and I just don't know it yet." She turned the pages slowly, touching each word as one would a sacred relic. There was her life, not the life others saw, the cleaner, the exhausted mother, the invisible woman, but her real life, the one happening inside. The thoughts that couldn't be spoken, the observations that had no witnesses, the silent resistance of a woman who refused to be completely erased. In a 1994 notebook, she found the story she had written about a girl who taught herself to read, picking up old newspapers from the trash. In another passage from 2001, a chronicle about a domestic worker who overheard her employers talking about her as if she weren't there, and transformed each insult into a sentence in a secret book. In 2008, a short story about a mother who hid her own talent from her daughter, afraid the world would punish the girl for dreaming too big. She wove each insult into a sentence from a secret book. In 2008, a story about a mother who hid her own talent from her daughter, afraid the world would punish the girl for dreaming too big. Clara read until 2 in the morning, and when she finally closed the last notebook, she made the decision she had been postponing for years, perhaps decades. She hadn't made it sooner because she lacked courage, or time, or some last glimmer of hope. But now, with the bitter taste of humiliation still in her mouth, with Victor's voice echoing in her ear, "You can't read." Now she knew what she had to do. She would turn those notebooks into a book. She would tell her story, and she would prove, not to Victor or any of them, but to herself, that she had always been more than they could see. But first, she needed to remember how she had gotten there. She needed to revisit the ghosts that had made her who she was. Clara was born on a farm in the interior of Paraná, daughter of João and Teresa, rural workers who woke before the sun and slept after the moon. There was no school nearby. There were no books. There was nothing but red earth, endless coffee plantations, and the heavy silence of those who know they were born to serve. But Clara was different. Even as a child, she had a voracious hunger to understand the world beyond that farm. At 7 years old, when she accompanied her mother to the big house to help with the cleaning, she saw a bookshelf full of books for the first time. She was mesmerized. There were so many. Colorful, thick, thin, old. They seemed to hold secrets she didn't even know existed. The mistress of the house, Dona Beatriz, noticed the girl's gaze. She smiled condescendingly. "You wouldn't know how to read these, dear. They are difficult books." That sentence planted something in Clara, a fierce stubbornness, a need to prove that she indeed would. She started collecting old newspapers that Dona Beatriz threw away. Hidden in the chicken coop at night with a stolen candle, she deciphered the letters one by one. A, B, C. She pieced together the sounds, formed words, read aloud, stumbling, making mistakes, starting over. By 12 years old, Clara read better than some adults on the farm. By 15, she devoured everything she could find, from medicine labels to passages from forgotten novels in a trunk in the big house. And it was at 15 that she discovered her calling, not just to read, but to write. She wrote about her mother, who washed clothes with calloused and bleeding hands, but never lost her tenderness when combing Clara's hair. She wrote about her father, who worked 16 hours in the sun and still found the strength to tell invented stories before bed. She wrote about the injustice of being born poor, about the silent cruelty of those who had everything and did not see those who had nothing. But then, at 17, she became pregnant. The young man, Julio, the caretaker's son, had promised marriage. He disappeared when she told him about the pregnancy. Clara's family, Catholic and strict, expelled her. "You shamed us," her father said, without looking her in the eye. "Don't come back until you've redeemed yourself." Clara left with a cardboard suitcase and 20 rees in her pocket. She came to São Paulo because someone had said there was work in big cities. She found that there was work, yes, the kind of work that breaks your back and pays little. She cleaned houses, sold candy at traffic lights, slept on park benches until she found a spot in a shelter for pregnant women. And Sophia was born. Small, red, crying. Clara looked at that fragile little creature and made a promise. "You will have everything I didn't have. You will study. You will be a doctor. You will have respect." And Sophia was born, tiny, red, wailing. Clara looked at that fragile little creature and made a promise. "You will have everything I didn't have. You will study. You will be a doctor. You will have respect." She worked like never before. 3 simultaneous jobs. Cleaning during the day, dishwashing at night, ironing in the early hours. She barely slept. She barely ate. But she saved every penny to pay for a private school for Sophia. And at night, when her daughter slept, Clara stole an hour, 2, and wrote. She always wrote. It was her way of not going insane. Her secret resistance. No one knew. Not even Sophia. Because Clara was afraid of being ridiculed. Afraid they would find out and say, "Who do you think you are? A cleaning lady writer? Go back to your place." So she put away her notebooks and continued to be invisible until that day with Victor Morales, until the public humiliation, until the rage finally turned into fuel. Sitting on her bedroom floor with notebooks scattered around, Clara picked up the old computer Sophia had received from a friend. She turned it on, opened a blank document, and began to type, slowly but determinedly, the first sentence of what would be her book. "My name is Clara, and for 52 years I was invisible." Clara's fingers were not used to a keyboard. Calloused from mops and soap, they stumbled on the keys, mistyped letters, had to start over. But she didn't stop. Every word that appeared on the screen was a small revenge. Every sentence, a piece of dignity recovered. She wrote about the farm, about the eviction, about the first years in São Paulo, when she had more hunger for words than for food. She wrote about the houses where she worked, the female employers who treated her like furniture, the male employers who looked too much and paid too little. And she wrote about Victor Morales. She didn't use his real name, of course. She called him Ricardo Tavares, but anyone who knew him would recognize him. The arrogance, the casual cruelty, the pleasure he took in demeaning those beneath him. Clara described the cafe scene with surgical precision. Every word he said, every glance from those who watched and did nothing. And then, she wrote what no one saw, what happened inside her during that humiliation, the contained rage, the dignity he tried to steal, but which she, stubbornly, refused to surrender. 3 months. Every night. Clara woke at 4:30, worked all day, returned at 10, and wrote until 1-2 in the morning. Sophia noticed something had changed in her mother, but she didn't know what. There was a different light in Clara's eyes. a determination that seemed to burn from within. "Mum, are you okay?" she asked one night, concerned. "You look, I don't know, different." Clara smiled. This time, it wasn't a protective smile. It was genuine. "I'm fine, daughter. I'm just, doing something for myself. Something I should have done a long time ago." She didn't say what it was. Not yet. She was afraid that if she said it aloud, if she exposed the dream to the light, it would unravel like all the dreams of people like her. But when she finished the manuscript on a December dawn as the sky began to lighten, Clara looked at the 240 pages and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Pure, clean, deserved pride. She named the file The Invisible Woman. Finding a publisher was harder than writing. Clara researched online, discovering that large publishers rarely accepted manuscripts from unknown authors. She needed a literary agent. She needed contacts. She needed things she didn't have. Online, she discovered that major publishers rarely accepted manuscripts from unknown authors. She needed a literary agent. She needed contacts. She needed things she didn't have. But there were small publishers, independent ones, those that took a chance on voices the market ignored. Clara made a list. She sent the manuscript to 15 of them with a simple letter. "My name is Clara Silva. I have been a cleaner for 35 years. This is my story." The replies, when they came, were polite but firm. "Thank you for your submission, but it doesn't fit our editorial line at the moment." Or worse, absolute silence. Clara started to give up. Maybe Victor was right. Maybe she really didn't know her place. Maybe dreaming truly was a luxury people like her couldn't afford. But then, 3 weeks after sending the manuscript to the last publisher on her list, a small publisher named Vozes do Sul, Voices of the South, specializing in marginalized literature, she received an email. Subject: Manuscript, The Invisible Woman. Clara opened it with trembling hands. "Dear Clara, I read your manuscript in one sitting. I cried, I laughed, I saw myself, I recognize myself. I want to publish it. Can we talk? Sincerely, Marina Fonseca, Editor-in-Chief, Vozes do Sul." Clara read it 3 times, then another 3. Then she called Sophia, who was at college, and said in a choked voice, "Daughter, there's something I need to tell you." Sophia was in shock, then disbelieving, then emotional. "Mom, why did you never tell me you were writing?" Clara had no easy answer. How to explain decades of internalized shame? How to say she was afraid of disappointing, of being ridiculous, of her daughter being ashamed of having a mother who thought of herself as a writer? "I was afraid," she finally said, her voice low. "Afraid you'd think it was silly. Afraid people would laugh. Afraid of..." She paused, searching for the right words. Afraid of dreaming too big and falling. Sophia hugged her mother tightly. "You should have told me. I would never, ever have thought it was silly." She pulled back, holding Clara's face with her hands. "You're incredible. You've always been incredible, and now everyone will know." But Clara wasn't sure she wanted everyone to know. They agreed with the publisher that she would use a pseudonym, not out of fear of Victor or the company, but because exposure was frightening. Clara had spent her whole life being invisible. To be seen, suddenly, seemed terrifying. Marina disagreed. "Clara, your story is powerful precisely because it's true. Because you are real. Use your name. Own it." It took time, but Clara agreed. Real name, real story, no hiding. The book was published in March. A small print run, 1,000 copies. The publisher didn't have money for extensive marketing. They made some posts on social media. They sent copies to some literary bloggers. And they waited. The first few weeks were silent. They sold 120 books. Not bad for an unknown author from a small publisher, Marina said, but far from a success. Clara continued working at Nexus, waking up at 4:30, cleaning the same offices, seeing Victor Morales every day, who didn't even look at her. He didn't know. No one there knew, and Clara wasn't telling. Not yet. But then, in the 3rd week of April, a journalist named Julia Andrade, known for her reports on social inequality, read the book, and she wrote a review on the country's main news portal. In the third week of April, a journalist named Julia Andrade, known for her reports on social inequality, read the book. She wrote a review in the country's main news portal. The Invisible Woman is not just a book, it's a punch to the gut. Clara Silva, a cleaner for 35 years, has written the most visceral and powerful testimony on class, labor, and dignity I've read in recent years. Her writing is raw, yet poetic, painful, yet hopeful. This is the kind of book we need to read, not for its literary merit, which is considerable, but because it tells stories that Brazil insists on erasing. Buy it, read it, spread the word. The review went viral. In 2 days, the book sold out in bookstores. Marina had to do an urgent reprint, 5,000 copies, then 10,000. Radio shows started calling. Literary podcasts wanted interviews. A niche TV channel requested her participation. Clara could hardly believe it. She worked during the day, gave interviews at night and on weekends. Sophia helped her respond to emails, organize the schedule that suddenly existed. It was surreal. She, Clara Silva, the Invisible Woman, was becoming visible in a way she had never imagined. But she still worked at Nexus, because there was a reason, a plan, something she knew she had to do at the right time. Victor Morales didn't read Brazilian literature. He didn't have time for such things, as he put it. He preferred biographies of American businessmen and self-help books on leadership. So he didn't see the review. He didn't hear about the book. He had no idea that the cleaner who tidied his office every morning was the author of the moment. But other people in the company knew. Fernanda, the secretary who had witnessed the humiliation months earlier, bought the book out of curiosity after seeing Clara's name. She immediately recognized the story, the office, the description of the cruel boss, the coffee scene. She told 2 colleagues, who told others. Within a week, half the company knew. They whispered in the hallways, exchanged glances when Clara passed with her cleaning cart, but no one spoke to her, and no one told Victor. Clara noticed. She saw the glances, heard the whispers that ceased when she approached, but she said nothing. It wasn't time yet. The book continued to grow. 30,000 copies sold, 50,000. Invitations to literary fairs. A major national TV show requested an interview. Clara accepted. It aired on a Thursday night. Millions watched. The host, famous for her emotional interviews, asked Clara why she continued working as a cleaner, even with the book's success. Clara took a deep breath. "Because I haven't finished what I started yet," she said, serenely. "There's something I need to do, and I'll do it at the right time." The host pressed on. Clara didn't budge. She merely smiled. That smile was different now. No longer a smile of protection, but of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. On Friday morning, when Clara arrived at Nexus, the atmosphere was different. People looked at her openly now. Some smiled with admiration. Others averted their eyes, perhaps ashamed of never having truly seen her before. Victor still didn't know, but Clara decided it was time. She spent the morning preparing everything with meticulous calm. She bought 2 copies of the book at a nearby bookstore. She wrapped one in neutral gift paper. The other she left in her bag. At 3 p.m, she knocked on Victor's office door. He was on the phone, as usual. He gestured impatiently for her to wait. She waited. This time, not with the submissive patience of before, but with the calm of someone who controls the narrative. Victor. He was on the phone, as always. He gestured impatiently for her to wait. She waited. This time, not with the submissive patience she had shown before, but with the calm of someone in control of the narrative. When he hung up, he looked at her with irritation. "What is it? Shouldn't you be cleaning the bathrooms on the 8th floor?" "I'd like to give you something, sir," Clara said, her voice firm. He frowned, confused and already impatient. "I don't have time for—" She placed the wrapped package on the table. "Please, it will only take a minute." Victor sighed, exasperated, but took the package. He opened it with abrupt movements, annoyed by the interruption. When he saw the book, he looked at the cover without comprehending. The Invisible Woman by Clara Silver. "What is this?" "It's a book I wrote, sir." He looked at her, then at the book, then back at her. The confusion on his face began to give way to something different. "You... what?" Clara took a second copy from her bag. She opened it to a marked page. "You once asked me if I could read. I've come to answer." She began to read aloud, clearly and slowly. "Ricardo looked at me as if I were dirt on his shoes. 'Do you know how to read?' he asked. And everyone laughed. But he didn't know I'd been reading since I was 7. He didn't know I devoured books while he was still learning to tie his shoelaces. He didn't know I wrote stories while he bought diplomas and status. He knew nothing about me. To him, I was just the cleaner, the invisible one." The silence that followed was absolute. Victor turned pale. He took the book from her hands and began to leaf through it, frantic now, searching, recognizing. The description of the office, of the building, of the situations, of him. "This, you can't," his voice came out strangled. "This is defamation. I'll sue you." You can try," Clara interrupted, still calm. "But the character's name is Ricardo Tavares, not Victor Morales. He works at a consulting firm, not a technology company, and everything in there is true. Can you prove it's a lie?" Victor opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked like a fish out of water, searching for arguments he couldn't find. Clara took a pen from her uniform pocket and opened the book to the first page. She wrote in neat handwriting, "To Victor Morales, who taught me there are 2 ways to be remembered, by what we build or by what we destroy. There is still time to choose. With respect, Clara Silver." She closed the book and left it on the table. Then she took a white envelope from her other pocket. "Here's my resignation letter. 15 years. Thank you for the opportunity to learn who I don't want to be." She turned to leave. "Wait." Victor's voice was hoarse. Clara stopped, but didn't turn around. Why did you do this?" Clara looked over her shoulder. "Because for 15 years, you treated me as if I were nothing, and I needed to prove, not to you, but to myself, that I was always someone, even when no one saw it." She left. She walked down the hallway with her back straight. Employees had gathered, drawn by the sound of the argument. When they saw her, some began to applaud. Slowly at first, then louder. Fernanda, the secretary, had tears in her eyes. The sales manager, the one who had witnessed the humiliation and done nothing, hung his head in shame. Clara nodded briefly, in thanks, and entered the elevator. When the doors closed, she finally allowed the tears to fall. But this time, they were not tears of humiliation or pain. They were of relief, of liberation, of silent justice finally served. The doors closed, and she finally allowed the tears to fall. But this time, they were not tears of humiliation or pain. They were tears of relief, of liberation, of silent justice finally served. Upstairs, in his office, Victor Morales stood alone with the book in his hands. He didn't know it yet, but the whole world was about to discover who he truly was. The interview on the national program aired 3 days after Clara's dismissal. The presenter showed excerpts from the book. She read specific passages, including the scene of humiliation. She asked if it was based on real events. "Every word," Clara responded, her voice firm. "Every scene happened. I changed names and a few details, but the essence is true. For 15 years, I was treated as if I were invisible, and not just by him, but by the entire system that allows people like me to be disposable." The repercussions were immediate. On social media, thousands of people began sharing similar stories. Domestic workers, cleaners, street sweepers, security guards, all invisible. All with stories of humiliation they had carried in silence. And then someone connected the dots. A former Nexus employee, dismissed months earlier, posted on a forum, "I know who Ricardo Tavares from the book is. I used to work with him. It's Victor Morales, Nexus's executive director. And everything in the book is exactly how he acts. The post went viral. Journalists began to investigate. They contacted current and former Nexus employees. The stories multiplied. Victor shouting at interns until they cried. Victor humiliating subordinates in meetings. Victor making jokes about the riffraff who cleaned the building. A clear pattern. Decades of documented abuse of power in increasingly numerous testimonies. The company went into damage control mode. It published a statement saying it did not condone any form of moral harassment and that it would investigate the allegations. But the pressure grew. Clients began cancelling contracts. Investors demanded answers. The hashtag Justice for Clara dominated social media. Victor tried to defend himself. He gave a disastrous interview where he denied everything, called Clara an opportunist, and said she was distorting facts to sell books. The strategy backfired. Old videos resurfaced. Victor at corporate events making classist comments, laughing at jokes about domestic workers, boasting about his privileged background. Within 2 weeks, he was removed from the company. At first, it was called temporary leave, but everyone knew what it meant. A month later, the dismissal was made official. Nexus announced a new code of conduct and a diversity and respect training program. It was late, but it was something. Clara watched it all from afar, with complex feelings. She felt no pleasure in his downfall. It wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about dignity, about proving that she mattered, that her voice had value, that no one had the right to treat her, or anyone, as disposable. The book sold 200,000 copies in the first 3 months. Clara received invitations for lectures, literary festivals, universities. She began giving writing workshops for domestic workers, guards, drivers, those who, like her, had stories but no voice. Sophia graduated in medicine at the end of that year. At the graduation ceremony, when her name was called, she went onto the stage and asked for the microphone. "I wouldn't be here without my mother," she said, her voice choked. "She cleaned floors so I could study. She swallowed humiliation so I could have dignity. She made herself invisible so I could shine. Mum, this achievement is ours, more yours than mine. She cleaned floors so I could study. She swallowed humiliation so I could have dignity. She made herself invisible so I could shine. Mum, this achievement is ours, more yours than mine." Clara cried. She cried as she had never cried in her life, out of pride, relief, immense and inexhaustible love. That night, sitting in the small living room of the apartment they could now renovate, Sophia asked, "What will you do now, Mom? You don't need to work as a cleaner anymore. You can dedicate yourself solely to writing." Clara remained silent for a long moment. "I'm not ashamed of what I did," she finally said. "Cleaning is not lesser work. The problem was never the work. It was how I was treated while doing it." She held her daughter's hand. "I want to keep writing, but I also want to help other people like me find their voices. I don't want anyone else to feel invisible." And that's what she did. 6 months later, Clara released her second book. Found Voices was a collection of stories about invisible workers, caretakers, doormen, cooks, drivers. She'd interviewed them, written their stories, given literary form to lives no one recorded. The book was dedicated to all who never had their stories told. It sold even more than the first. Clara founded an NGO called Word and Dignity, which offered free literacy and creative writing classes for low-income workers. The project spread. It started with 10 students in a borrowed room. Within a year, it had centers in 5 cities. In one of these classes, a 48-year-old domestic worker named Rosa wrote her first short story. She cried when she finished. "I never thought anyone would want to hear what I have to say," she whispered. Clara hugged her. "We all have something to say. The world just needs to learn to listen." Victor Morales disappeared from the corporate circuit. He tried to get positions in other companies, but his reputation preceded him. He tried independent consulting, but clients didn't want to associate with his name. He tried to rebuild his image, but every interview, every post, reminded people of the book, of Ricardo Tavares, of his cruelty captured forever in pages thousands had read. 1 year after the publication, Clara received an email. Subject: request for a conversation. Sender: Victor Morales. She almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, something about closing cycles, made her open it. Clara, I don't expect you to reply. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just need to say something I should have said a long time ago. You were right. About everything. I spent my life treating people just as I treated you, as if they were less. It took a year of therapy and a lot of pain to understand that I was the problem, that my arrogance hid my own insecurity, that diminishing others was the only way I knew to feel great. I'm not asking for compassion. I'm just saying thank you. You gave me the mirror I needed, even if it hurts to look. I wish you all the best. You deserve it. Victor. Clara read it 3 times. She felt something complex. Not pity, not automatic forgiveness, but recognition. Recognition that even cruel people can change if they want to. That redemption is possible, but it needs to be earned through actions, not words. She replied briefly and honestly, Victor, I accept your words. I hope you use what you've learned to be better. Not with me. You owe me nothing, but with the next people who cross your path. That's the only redemption that matters. Clara. My words. I hope you use what you've learned to be better. Not with me. You owe me nothing, but with the next people who cross your path. That is the only redemption that matters. Clara. She never heard from him again, but she also never thought of him with anger again. He had been the catalyst, yes, but the story was never about him. It was always about her, about finding her own voice, about refusing to be erased. 3 years after the publication of The Invisible Woman, Clara was invited to give a lecture at the same university where Sophia had studied. The auditorium was packed. Students, professors, workers, people who had read her books, people who saw themselves in them. Clara walked onto the stage in the same faded blue uniform she wore at Nexus. There was a surprised silence. Then, applause that seemed to never end. I brought this uniform, she began when the silence returned, because it is part of who I am. I am not ashamed of it. I am ashamed of how I was treated while wearing it. She paused, letting the words sink in. All my life, I was told my place was on the floor, scrubbing, that I had no right to dream, to create, to be more. And for a long time, I believed it. I carried my dreams hidden, as if they were shameful, as if I didn't deserve to take up space. She looked at the audience, hundreds of eyes fixed on her. But then I understood something fundamental. No one is born invisible. We are made invisible by a world that decides who deserves to be seen. And the only way to change that is to refuse to accept it. It is to write our own stories. It is to say loud and clear, I exist, I matter, my life has value, more applause, more tears. Not only hers, but from dozens of people in the audience who recognize themselves in that story. After the lecture, a young woman approached, 20 years old perhaps, a fast food attendant's uniform, trembling hands holding a tattered notebook. I also write, she whispered, almost ashamed, but I've never shown it to anyone. I'm afraid they'll find it ridiculous, or that they'll say I should focus on my job, not on impossible dreams. Clara took the notebook, opened it, read a few paragraphs. The words were raw, but honest. They were full of life. It's not ridiculous, she said, returning the notebook. It's courageous. Keep writing. Don't let anyone steal that from you. She touched the girl's shoulder. You are already a writer. You just need to believe in yourself. The young woman nodded, her eyes welling up, and left, hugging the notebook as if it were a treasure. Clara watched her leave and thought of herself decades ago, hiding her own notebooks. She thought of all the silenced voices, of all the buried dreams, and she thought, no more, not if she could help it. One Sunday afternoon, Clara returned to the neighborhood where Sophia had grown up. The small apartment was still there, but they no longer resided in it. With the money from her books, Clara had bought a simple house, complete with a garden where she planted herbs and flowers. Sophia lived nearby, already working in a public hospital, attending precisely the kind of people her mother had always been, the invisible ones. But Clara returned to that apartment because the new resident, a Venezuelan immigrant, had asked for help with writing. She wanted to document her journey. Clara spent Sundays there, teaching, guiding, giving a voice. Sitting at the same table where Clara had written her first book, with the same weak light filtering in through the window that didn't close properly, she looked around and smiled. So much had changed, yet so much remained the same. People fighting, surviving, dreaming in silence. "Do you think my story matters?" the Venezuelan woman asked, insecurely. She felt pain, yet smiled. So much had changed, but so much remained the same. People struggling, surviving, dreaming in silence. "Do you think my story matters?" the Venezuelan woman asked, hesitantly. Clara held her hand. "All stories matter, especially the ones nobody wants to hear. Those are the most essential." As she left, as evening fell, Clara walked through the familiar streets. She passed the bus stop, where she had waited for years, the bakery, where she used to buy day-old bread on sale, the small square where Sophia played as a child. Everything seemed smaller now, or perhaps she had grown. She sat on a park bench and opened her bag. Inside, a new notebook, untouched. The first pages blank, waiting. She picked up the pen, the same one she had used to dedicate the book to Victor, and wrote the first line of what would be her next project. There are words that imprison, and there are words that liberate. This is a story about choosing which ones to write. She closed the notebook and looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. She thought of the girl she had been, hungry for words and full of impossible dreams. She thought of the woman she had become, invisible to the world's eyes, yet vast within. And she thought of the woman she was now, finally seen, finally free, finally whole. Not because someone had discovered her, but because she, stubbornly, had refused to disappear. Clara put away the notebook and walked back home. The night was cool, the streets quiet, and for the first time in 55 years, she did not feel the weight of carrying a secret. She did not feel shame about who she was. She did not feel the need to be invisible, because she had learned, in the most painful and most beautiful way possible, that existing is not a privilege. It is a right, and nobody, no boss, no system, no voice attempting to diminish, can take that away from someone who refuses to be erased. The light in her house was on. Sophia was waiting for her for dinner. And inside, on the desk she had bought with the money from her first book, 23 old notebooks rested on a glass shelf, no longer hidden in a shoebox, but displayed, honored, preserved, because they were more than notebooks. They were proof. They were resistance. They were irrefutable evidence that Clara Silva had always existed, even when the world insisted on not seeing. And now, finally, everyone saw.